I will call the meeting to order. Roll call, please. Here.
Sorry, I fell out of the. Belsky, Supervisor Belsky here. Supervisor.
Franco's here.
Supervisor
Gasky's here.
Supervisor
You have to guess. Grady.
Grady.
Here.
Supervisor Morrissey.
Yes.
Supervisor Kent.
And Supervisor Brown is excused. Citizens' comments. Are there any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Moving on to the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Moved by Supervisor Morrissey, second by Supervisor Belsky. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the amendment of the County Board, Chapter 2, County Board Rules of Procedure. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, supervisors. Attorney Phillips let me know late yesterday that unfortunately he had a family conflict commitment. He didn't look at both calendars when he said he could be here tonight. He did say he'd be available by phone if we needed to discuss specific matters with him. So I do have him ready if need be. As the supervisors know, we've been working on this project for quite some time. It actually stretches back into the previous board. The draft that you have in front of you and that was sent out last week is substantially identical to the one that you approved last fall, where we simply just ran out of time to get it through the board as we came up on the Sindai and the budget process. I say substantially because there are 3 changes that were made at the legislative committee, none of which I think are significant, but I do want to point them out to you so that I'm not trying to mislead you into saying it's exactly the same document you approved before. And then we also have 2, I guess what I'll consider Scrivener. Well, one's a Scrivener error. The other one is just a matter that frankly we all overlooked. And as we were doing, one last, we did come up with one additional item in the rules that appears to be inconsistent with how we're approaching everything else. And so I would ask that we strike it this evening. Let me start by pointing out, like I said, the 3 changes that were made to the draft by the legislative committee last September and October after this committee had approved it. The first one would be in section 2.13 sub 3 sub B. That is in the section on standing committees. Sub B, sub 3 speaks about committee assignments. Sub B talks about basically provides an opportunity for the the chair to not appoint somebody to a committee if there's a compelling reason to do that. The legislative committee added a requirement that failing to have at least 1 committee assignment would require a 2/3 vote of the board to approve that decision of the chair. So that was the first modification that was made at the legislative committee.
Where was it? Where exactly?
It's on.
Page 20, I'm sorry, page 20 of the clean version. And I'm working off of the clean version because I find the red line very difficult to try and follow because of all the
The
changes.
red line is 2-22.
But it is in section 2.13 sub 3 committee assignments, sub B.
Okay.
All right, so again, the addition there was a requirement that the board ratify by a 2/3 vote a decision by the board chair not to put someone on at least 1 standing committee. The second change that was made at the legislative committee came from Supervisor Stalker. It is in 2.03, which is meetings, quorum, conduct of. page 4 of the clean version. Sub 4, we added a clarification that the board chair shall preside at all meetings, all county board meetings. So that was added and approved at the legislative committee. Do I have any more?
So the entire section was brought forward or just the language was modified?
I think the only thing that was added was clarifying that the county board chair provides at meetings of the board.
Okay.
There we go. I'm sorry. And the third one is in section 2.05, which is on closed sections. There was a great deal of discussion, certainly at the legislative committee. I don't remember how much conversation we may have had here at the executive committee, but the legislative committee, there was a great deal of discussion about the ability to close a session specifically of a committee to folks who are not members of that committee. The legislative committee did add, and would be in sub 2.205, that a board chair's or committee chair's decision to exclude a non-committee member from a closed session would require not only a stated a verbalized conflict of interest for the person who's being excluded, and again, a ratification of that decision by by 2/3 of the members present of whichever meeting was being closed. I think we're trying to strike a balance between various competing concerns, and again, that was what the legislative committee did at their meetings in September and October. So those are the three changes that were made to the draft rules after this committee approved them back in September. And I wanted to, again, just call those out and identify those as the three additional changes that have been made after this committee saw it last fall. So then in addition to those changes that have already been made, and were reconfirmed, I guess, last week when the legislative committee, by unanimous vote of those present, did approve this same draft again as it had last fall. First, on page 3 of the clean draft, 2.02 sub 4, which is entitled session. There is an incorrect reference in there. It says the 2-year period of time between the organizational meetings in section 2.04 sub 1 sub A. It should read 2.02 sub 1 sub A. That's just a Scrivener's error. I don't know if that was a result of things being moved around or if it was just a typo when it was being put together, but it's to clarify, and that was actually something, again, that Supervisor Stalker brought to my attention. The reference is just wrong. It should read 2.02 sub 1 sub A. The other amendment that I would ask to be made tonight would be on, again, page 16 of the clean version. That's in 2.12 finance and budget, sub 6. About between a half and 2/3 of the way through, there's a sentence that says, in all circumstances, any such resolution or ordinance proposal to be calendared for action by the county board within 45 days of referral to the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, I'm just going to be very honest. Neither Attorney Phillips nor I can remember how this came to be, why it came to be, why it's in there. We had gone over this with the finance folks months ago when we were first starting this process. Everybody somehow missed it. That language could very well be read to indicate that any budget change or appropriation of money that's in front of the Finance Committee has to go to the board after the Finance Committee considers it, regardless of the determination of the Finance Committee. That I don't think is the intent. It certainly is not consistent with the way we have been approaching other matters in regards to the committee structure and the committee process. And so we would just ask that that be taken out.
Supervisor Benz.
What happens if the chair or the board chair and the vice chair aren't there to preside over a board meeting?
Then we have language in the rules that talks about what that line of succession is. It goes to the next most recent chair.
Okay, but it's not in here, but we have it.
It's not there, it's elsewhere.
Okay, all
I
right,
couldn't
okay.
tell you off the top of my head.
And that's
but,
fine,
that
that's
it's in
fine.
there.
I
Yeah.
read it somewhere in
Yeah.
here.
Okay, that's fine.
Somewhere.
That's fine. I'm just looking at this and it's not in here, so.
Right, and I think that's just because that section is specific to the election of
Okay,
those two
okay,
officers.
okay,
No, thank you for the question.
no problem. And then I wanna go back to a session being 2 years. And then within 6 months, at the end of 6 months, somebody could bring something back. That's correct,
That,
right?
that language is in this draft, yes.
Okay, okay, cause I just didn't wanna have to wait 2 years if somebody wants to revisit something, okay,
No, if the board has, rejected a proposal or voted against a proposal, not approved it, it can be brought back, after 6 months have passed and with a majority vote of the board.
okay,
That's-
How about
that's
if
what
it's,
it says.
go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay, how about, to tag on to that, if it is, voted no in committee, can it be brought back to the board?
Yeah, in 6 months, that's my
6 months,
question.
okay,
You don't have to wait 2 years.
okay.
Because they
gotcha.
switched the sessions
Yeah.
from being a 1-year session and then a 1-year session to a full 2-year session. Which I didn't have a problem with, as long as you can bring stuff back and not have to wait until the whole session is done.
Okay.
That was
got
my
it.
concern back then, so.
And Joe, is it a simple majority? Is it a 2/3, 3/4?
To reintroduce something that's been
Yes.
defeated, it would be a simple majority.
Yeah, I
Simple
hope so.
majority, okay. Supervisor Grady.
So we're taking a look at what you just mentioned here, Corporation Council, page 16 on our clean copy, is that right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the halfway down the page, within 45 days, referral to Finance and Administration Committee, is that
Yes.
part of it?
Yep.
So what is your proposal? Are we
My
striking?
my
some
ask
of
is
those?
that sentence just gets struck. Strucken? It's been a long week.
So the entire sentence beginning what?
In all circumstances. Through
Okay,
finance and administration. That would be my ask. Obviously, I can't make that motion, but that's my ask.
Supervisor Gunn made the motion.
Well, Supervisor Grady still has to say.
well, I mean, I would think that I would understand why this came from. I'm not necessarily saying I'm supporting it, but they're just saying that if it was an active concept, that there should be a time limit so that it really sees the light of day. So you're saying the downside is what? What's the downside?
I think the downside is it could be interpreted as everything that, well, not everything, but anything that is a budget modification or a how we're approaching.
You're saying it could be interpreted that way.
I think someone reading that could very easily say, Joe, this says in all circumstances, any such resolution has to come to the board within 45 days.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, that's not what it means. And then, we get into an argument.
Sure, okay. So that's for our advisement. We can take a look at that, and we're supposed to reach a decision tonight. Is that the plan? Okay. What else?
Supervisor
I'll
Gunn.
make a motion to strike that from the document.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Gunn, second by Supervisor Gaske. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And the other thing you wanted an amendment on was what? That we just made a
2.02.
yeah, we just made a grammatical error or something. All
The wrong section is noted. So yeah, the three,
right, I'll make a motion to amend that to make it the right section numbers in there.
I'll second it.
Motion by Supervisor Gunn, second by Supervisor Franco to correct 2.02 subsection 4 from 2.04 to 2.02. Any discussion on that amendment? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Then do we need to discuss the session now?
Supervisor Grady.
I have something. It came up just last night at the county board meeting. If I recall correctly, or at the south branch of the Pike presentation, in the minutes or in the advertised agenda, there was no specific section for citizens' comments. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, in this particular case, we had a rather large gallery and some of them wanted to speak. Okay. Heard from one supervisor saying, you know, maybe it's really not the time and place for this because we're not making a policy decision. I raised my hand and I said, no, I think the people here, they should be able to speak. So that is not delineated in this document right here. The page we're looking at would be page 5 at the bottom. And it says rules for citizens comment. And it goes into at the very bottom, you know, section A, very straightforward. B, you know, very straightforward. We have all those kind of things. But I would think that in certain circumstances, which appeared last night, we could make provision for citizens to be able to speak, even though it's not a previously agenda item. And it could come to quite a discussion if it was, you know, some type of heated topic. And one group of supervisors said, well, it's not on the agenda, we can't do it. And I sure said, look, we got people here in the room. This is a democratic process. We can at least take the time to hear what they want to say under certain conditions. So I just drew up a sentence or two that would say, if citizens' comments has not been previously notated as an agenda item, the county board chairperson may allow citizens' comments based upon citizen attendance, etc. And that would give the county board chairman the latitude to do that without necessarily having a raging debate between county board members on the precedent of that. Weigh in, Corp Counsel.
So my first comment, and this isn't in any way a judgment one way or another on the proposal. This really, I think, only comes up if you're dealing with the committee of the whole meetings. And I say that because as part of the rules, we have a agenda form that we're supposed to be following. Citizen comments is included on there. So it goes on all of the county board agendas. Likewise, in the section on county board standing committees, it indicates each standing committee shall place an item on every committee agenda meeting for citizen comments. So the only time it comes up is for committee of the whole meetings. And I'll be very frank, often the question is raised, do we have citizen comments at committee of the whole? And the answer is kind of up to the discretion of the chair. I don't know that we need to include language in the rules to that extent. I think it falls in the sort of inherent ability of the chair to control the meeting. I'm also, again, not opposed if people want to have it in there. Just like I say, I think it would be of limited value only really to committee of the whole meetings.
And I agree. I think your point is well taken, and it may not come up very often, but had this been a more contentious issue last night, we could have had a nice round robin between a group of supervisors saying, no, there should be citizens' comments, and a group saying no. And I think it would be good for the chair to have that discretion rather than having a debate going back and forth. So I'll yield to whatever this committee feels, but I think it should just be brought up for discussion.
Supervisor Gans.
I think that's a great point, Bill. The only problem I have with that is committee of the wholes a lot of times are just to present information to the board. There's really no weighing in on any decision, and citizens are always allowed to speak to weigh in on decisions. So that would be my comment to that. The other thing is you either have to have it that it should be at all or at none. It shouldn't be up to the chair if you don't want to get in trouble. I'm surprised that Corporation Counsel didn't say this, but if it's not put on the agenda, you really shouldn't do it. You can't just add an agenda item at the committee meeting, because then what if I chose not to show up because it's not on that agenda and a bunch of people got to speak and I made a stink out of that as a citizen?
Sure.
You know, so I'm one that I believe citizens' comments should always, I love citizens' comments. I never try to shut them up. I don't even like the 3-minute rule. So, that being said, I just don't know that, a committee of the whole, I think, should be left up to the chair if they want to include it or not, but it needs to be on an agenda. So it either needs to be all the time or no time, as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion on it. I've been a chair. I know how that goes.
Yep.
So.
Supervisor Belsky.
I think with regard to committee of the whole, that really is an informational meeting. It's not meant to have debate or motions or anything else. It's a presentation. And I think last night was an exception. It should be left to the chair. I think every other meeting does have citizens' comments, and I don't think it needs to be an all or nothing.
So if it's the will of this particular, executive committee, I'll withdraw the, modification, but at least I wanted to see the light of day and have some discussion about it. So if,
Supervisor Vice Chair Gashke.
Just to clarify, Bill, are you saying it would be at the sole discretion of the chair, whether he or she decides to, or would the chair put it to the body?
well, I
majority
mean,
vote?
I think the chair would have the discretion to do it either way, to say,
Okay.
we're gonna allow citizens comments, or we're gonna take a vote for citizens comments. But at least it would have some organizational pattern where when we have these, we don't have that delineated. So, I mean, that could be included in there's language as well, so.
As a chair, I would say if the board is entitled to ask questions, then maybe the chair should put citizens' comments on there prior to the meeting, so it's on the agenda. I mean, that might be a way to do it. You know, but if it's just a presentation, I mean, we're not even gonna be asking questions, and we've had that happen a couple times too, where we just had somebody come in, present to us, and we're done, and we've got the information. It's just really not a debate platform. So like I said, I do appreciate citizens' comments and allowing citizens to speak. I think on just some presentations to the board, when we have those committee of the wholes, I just don't think that it needs to, and if the chair wants it there, then they can put it on there on an agenda. But it has to
Well,
either be on an agenda or not.
That's a different thing then, because then you are obliged to have citizens' comments that
Right.
puts on the agenda.
Right.
This is basically allowing the chair to kind of sense the mood in the room on that particular evening, which sometimes can be valuable. So Madam Chair, do you have any position in this?
Well, does the committee have any other comments?
I have a question.
Supervisor Morrison.
Do you have the ability to put citizens' comments on a committee of the whole agenda
Yes,
currently?
I do.
Then I don't know what this amendment would change one way or the other. You already have that authority.
All right, therefore, sensing the mood in the room, I withdraw my proposal and we can move on.
Supervisor Stacker.
I'm trying to figure out, the wording, for the agenda is for, board meetings. And the committee of the whole is a board meeting. So I don't know how we can just say we don't have.
But it's not though. It's the board is sitting as a committee of the whole. It's not sitting as the county board when we have a committee of the whole meeting.
Because no action is going to be taken, is that your rationale?
I mean, to a person in the public, it's gonna look like a board meeting. So I just don't, I'd be struggling with the idea of having an agenda for board meetings and not having, that's my comments.
Thank you, Supervisor Stacker. Any other discussion on the county board rules?
Yeah,
Supervisor Belsky.
I'd like some clarification on oh, where was it?
It was a number 8, I know that, subpoint.
Supervisor comments.
Oh, is it here? Page 5?
Yeah, under supervisor reports and comments. 2038. Yes, so currently, if we want something to be placed on the agenda, we call the county board chair and we ask, them if they can put it on as long as it's before Friday at 10 o'clock. She'll put it on the agenda for the following week. And here, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but it almost sounds like that during the meeting in supervisor reports, announcements and referrals, it sounds like I could say, oh, I want to make a motion to put an item on the agenda. There's no debate or action or anything, but we don't do that at that time.
Seems to me it's a tense problem. Should it had been referred? Because you're referring to past tense and he's
Well,
having it would be referred.
This is talking about the agenda and supervisor reports, announcements and referrals after citizens' comments at county board meetings. An agenda shall appear on the agenda title entitled supervisor reports, blah, blah, blah. This item is intended to allow committee chairs to make routine announcements, things like that. And then, so I'm looking between, so it must have got removed from the draft. Is that where it says it?
If it was removed, that's the red line version, so. I'm reading it and it makes sense to me, but
This item is intended to allow for committee reports by committee chairs, routine announcement, and matters that a supervisor would like referred to a committee or department. We don't refer things though.
But I think my understanding is this is if a supervisor wants to request to a committee to look at a particular issue or item, that's where they can bring it up on the board floor
and then
to
have
let you
it put
be
on.
aware, so that chair is aware of it and then can talk with that supervisor and make a communication.
Okay,
And
So
I think
there's
that's
no
existing
motion.
language. I think that's in our current rules.
okay.
That language. So.
Hey, it could be the chemo.
No,
brain,
yeah.
But, it just seemed to me like, oh, to, refer it. At
Yeah,
that
I've always viewed that more like, as the chair was saying, supervisor, I'd like this committee to take a look at something, or I'd like the highway department to take a look at something. That's something that can be
Gotcha.
said there. So
Okay,
no action's gonna be taken. It's just a request.
okay, gotcha. And then could you go over the closed session at meetings again? What was added?
So, by way of background, and if I need to, I will call Attorney Phillips, but by way of background, he was pointing out that the state statutes say anybody who is an elected member of a board cannot be excluded from a closed session of any subsidiary body. So a standing committee, for example, unless there is a local rule permitting it.
Okay.
So he said, again, without necessarily advocating one way or another, he said it is just one more tool you may want to have in your tool chest to say, we want a rule that permits us to close a committee hearing, for example, to supervisors who aren't part of that committee. Now, as way of an aside, I will say, in my 10 years nearly as corporation counsel, we've very rarely gone into closed session in committees. It has almost always been for a personnel related matter in finance, or if we were dealing with some sort of a litigation situation, but it's very rare we go into closed sessions. There was some angst about the possibility of closing committees to supervisors who didn't serve on that committee, and a concern that that was an authority that could potentially be abused. One of the examples that Attorney Phillips said was, what if we had a situation where we had a supervisor who had a genuine conflict of interest, either because they were a party to litigation or something else, wouldn't we want to be able to keep them out of the room while that was being discussed? So first, there was added that there really has to be a identifiable conflict of interest, that the chair who is proposing to close the meeting has to say Supervisor Smith can't be in here because of this conflict. And on top of that, as a further check on that power, if you will, that a 2/3 majority of the committee also has to ratify that decision to close the meeting to that individual supervisor.
Okay. I just wanted some clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions from supervisors?
Well, as long as you're on this subject, the way that it's being presented here, it sounds like it would be for a particular individual of a county supervisor who's not in that particular committee.
Yes.
Could this also be extended to just the committee itself and no other supervisors allowed regardless of background? Or does that have a provision for that?
I believe the way this is written now, a non-committee member who is proposed to be excluded from a closed session, there would have to be an identifiable conflict, and the rest of the committee would have to, or a 2/3 majority of the committee would have to.
So therefore, the blanket disqualification of other county board supervisors not being on the committee would not be appropriate
Correct.
unless you could say each person
Yep.
had a specific
Yep.
conflict of interest for whatever reason. Okay, all right. Satisfied?
Any other discussions from the committee? Seeing none, Supervisor Stocker.
It just looks like, yet a little bit further on in that sentence, the information shall be available to all supervisors on a written request. Would that include the person that was excluded?
It would be my opinion, as well as the opinion of Attorney Phillips, that if a supervisor was excluded from the closed session, they would also be precluded from getting that information until such time as the reason for the closed session evaporated.
My concern is the all supervisors. That I don't know if we want to clarify that. I just want to throw that out.
Right, that could be a legitimate loophole. What he's bringing up is the person say, okay, I'm excluded from the meeting. I have a conflict of interest, but I'll just get it on tape anyway. I'm just gonna review it.
Well,
So,
and I guess at the risk of putting myself in the hot seat, I think the language, unless corporation counsel determines disclosure is inappropriate, it sort of puts that in the lap of me or whoever is in my seat to say, no, the supervisor who couldn't attend the closed session also can't receive the recording of said closed session. So.
Session. Well, that's a good question. I don't think we do. I thought they shut the recordings off in closed sessions.
I think technically we're supposed to separate them. I think we're still supposed to record them because at some point they could become
Legal.
publicly available, but
Okay.
yeah. But I think we try and do a break, if you will. It's also the reason we try and put closed sessions at the end. It's a lot easier than stopping
Vice
it.
Chair Gaspey?
Actually, all I was gonna say was, at the end there, it does say unless corp counsel determines inappropriate. So I was just gonna point that out, but yeah.
Any further discussion? No other discussion on our county board rules?
Move to approve as amended.
Motion by Supervisor Morrissey, second by Supervisor Gens to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Move to adjourn.
Got another item.
Oh, I didn't see that on my agenda.
And we've even got Attorney Hall here. You can't.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I thought we did those. Oh, okay. All right.
I'm scarred.
We're starting to have fun.
Hello, Attorney Hall.
So likewise, on the amendment of chapters 19 and 20, the two ethics policies we're merging or proposing to merge into one. Again, this is in almost all aspects identical to the proposal that you approved back in September. The only change that was made was, again, a Scrivener's error in section I'm so busy working on the rules, I didn't get this one. Remember which one?
What did you have? I had this topic of it.
That's what I got from the minutes. But it's a typo, it's still like that, yeah. Oh, I think that's the page or the line number, that's what it is. All right, so at line number, 290, and again, I apologize, we don't have a red line in this one, but, something said as defined code, again, I think it was primarily a Scrivener's error. It didn't change, the, meaning or intent of that section. It's on material conflict of interest. Again, I think it was really just yes.
Just from the legislative committee, what we struck was as defined in section 19.07 or of this code, because we indicated it wasn't the proper language.
Thank you, sir.
So that's what was struck.
Appreciate it. So again, that was the only change that was made by the legislative committee to the ethics code after it was approved by this committee.
Any discussion on the ethics code for county elected officials and employees? I'm seeing no questions from the committee. Supervisor Stockbridge, do you have questions?
Just,
Comment?
it looks like there's extra space in that first line. Wait behind. Actually, county official, it looks like there's extra space that can be in this word.
I think that may just be the justification.
Yeah, justification of the text.
Yeah, I just double checked.
Any other comments or questions, Supervisor Stockbridge?
No.
Okay. No, that's okay. All right.
We'll do approve.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Morrissey, second by Supervisor Belsky. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Not making it now.
I move to adjourn.
I'll
Second.
second it.
Motion by Supervisor Morrissey to adjourn, seconded by Supervisor Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.